Hello out there, YouTubers, and welcome to PE Slick Podcast. I'm your host, Matt here. Each week I'm going to bring you something different in terms of leadership, ministering, entertainment, book authoring, and much more. But before we begin each time, I'm going to be airing a classic throwback commercial from back in the 80s or 90s or 2000s from my personal liking. Stay tuned.
You know, everyone in Dallas thinks you get rich in oil, but those people are dodos. That stuff is only good for preserving sardines. No, I got a better way. Mueller Light yogurt, virtually fat-free and in 3 terrific flavors. Oh, absolutely super. Mueller Light, the life of the party. Excuse me, I gotta go now. To a meeting of the yogurt barons.
Mueller Light from Mueller.
And we're back. I gotta add real quick, this is my first time calling to California.
Well, you're calling at a very chilly, wet time. Usually it's nice and warm, but the last few days it's been very cold and rainy.
Oh, yeah, it's raining quite a bit over here too. They calling for snow and everything, but so far nothing happened over here. Joining me this week is Dave Pruiksma. He is, what can I say about Dave? You know, he is a well-known, one of the key animators from Disney who animated Mrs. Potts and Chip and Flit from Pocahontas and many others from the Disney era from the 80s and 90s. And I'm happy they took the time out from California. This is my first time giving you guys a call from out there from Baltimore. I'm glad he took the time to be a part of my podcast, and I am thrilled that he's here. How you doing, Dave?
I'm fine, thank you.
That's good. Let's get started with this. Where are you from?
I'm actually from not far from where you are. I was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Arlington and Falls Church, Virginia.
Okay. I got family on my grandfather's side that's from Virginia. They're from Richmond, Virginia. What kind of hobbies did you have growing up?
Well, you know, I lived in a suburban area, but it was really almost rural. We had a creek and whatnot. So, you know, from the time we were 7 or 8, we were pretty much allowed to run. It was a different era, of course, but, you know, we'd be gone all day, and then we'd come home for dinner, you know, and that was pretty much the way things were. My hobbies were basically playing outside all the time, and, of course, watching TV, because that's when all the good cartoons were on. You know, they'd show the Bugs Bunnies in the afternoon, and there was, you know, in the evening there was the Flintstones and Top Cat and the Jetsons. So, you know, that's where I really spent a lot of my time, was doing those kinds of things. Later on, of course, I started becoming very interested in animation and began actually making my own films, and that became a hobby for me.
Okay. All right. Oh, so you consider yourself back then kind of someone who got into wanting to make movies and mixing animation as well, growing up drawing?
Yes. You know, once I decided what I wanted to do, and that was at a pretty early age, I remember going to the neighbor's house back in the early 60s. Not everyone had color television, and color TV was kind of a big event.
Right.
And so Disney was going to show Alice in Wonderland in color on the Wonderful World of Color Sunday night show. And we went to the neighbor's house to watch it in color, and I remember sitting there just transfixed at all the color and all the action and whatnot. Two big sequences were the Mad Tea Party and the Golden Afternoon, the flower sequence. And I remember, I was about 7 years old. I remember turning to my parents who were sitting on the sofa behind me and saying, "That's what I want to do." And I just pointed to the TV and they go, "What?" And I said, I want to make films like that.
Right.
And after that, I just started drawing a lot. And one of the neighbor kids taught me how to make a flip book, you know, where you take a pad and you draw the sequential drawings and then you flip it and it appears to move. And I was completely hooked at that point.
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't blame you because I know at that time Disney was, you know, booming. Like once he got started with Snow White, you know, everybody wanted to be a part of Disney.
Oh yeah, you know, it was the TV show on Sunday nights was a very big deal because it was an early show that was broadcast in color. And it also, you know, he showed a lot of his animation, and they even did some new animation for it. So I saw a lot of like Ludwig von Drake stuff. Now, I loved the Hanna-Barbera shows, but I knew the difference between the quality of animation in those shows and the quality of animation on, say, Ludwig von Drake on the early 60s TV shows.
I'm curious before I move on to my next question. So with Disneyland, before it was Disneyland before the Wonderful World of Color, and Disney has 4 categories. Did you have a particular one that you liked the most, like Tomorrowland, Adventureland, Fantasyland, Adventureland, Tomorrowland?
Well, Fantasyland is where they often showed the animation, but my favorite of all the lands, and it still is actually, is Tomorrowland. I always liked that sort of utopian future look. Like The Jetsons was my favorite show as a kid.
Right.
I loved that, that push button ease of the future, the way that was presented in the 50s and 60s. It's a little camp right now, but I mean, at the time, when I went to the World's Fair in the mid 60s, I mean, that was the future that they forecast. And I've always loved that. So in answer to your question, I'd say Tomorrowland was probably my favorite section.
Okay. Yeah. Around the early 2000s, Disney had put out their Walt Disney Treasures. They were like in a tin can, and they would have Disneyland episodes, and that's kind of how I got hooked into the Disneyland format episodes from what Walt Disney did. And I love the one he did where Disneyland goes to the World's Fair. I was kind of disappointed when they stopped putting Disneyland episodes out. I think that'd be cool if they put them back out again.
Yeah, I had bought a lot of those. I really liked them because there's a lot of stuff that you couldn't see anywhere else.
Right. So with animation, I mean, so when you knew that you wanted to do animation, what would be probably the first animated? I'm sure when you was in school, you did like an animated short.
Well, yes, yeah. When I was in college, yes, we were required to do animated films, especially at Cal Arts. That was like the big thing there. It was like you take all these classes, and when I was at Cal Arts in the late 70s and early and into the 80s, the teachers that were teaching there were the teachers that basically were the people, or some of the people that invented the Disney style of quality animation. People like Ken O'Connor taught perspective and regular drawing, general drawing. He was a layout guy. He laid out beautiful pieces like Clock Cleaners, the famous short, and he designed Cinderella's pumpkin coach and whatnot. He was a brilliant layout artist and designer. And so he was teaching Thornton his name is He was teaching us caricature. We had Bill Moore teaching us design, and I can't remember what the guy's name was that taught us. Elmer Plummer taught us life drawing. So these were all people who had worked on all these classic films and shorts. And they'd bring in artwork and they'd tell stories about it. It was really a great time. And then we would also have Jack Hanna, who was a director at Disney and an animator. He would teach us animation and whatnot. And the way we'd learn would be to take scenes that were Xeroxed from the Disney archives and in between them. And that's how we learned how to flip and roll and move things. And then we would make a silent film. I think we had to make a 1-minute silent film our freshman year by the end of the year. And then the second year, we graduated into sound. Now, remember, this is way before technology came in and made things a lot better.
Right.
We had to shoot on 16mm film, and we had to, on a big camera, and we had to cut the sound, like the magnetic sound on film, and sync it to the film, and then have a master print made with the optical track. So, I mean, it took a lot longer, and we had very little equipment.
Right.
We had one videotape machine, so we didn't have to just flip. We could actually. This was very early. It was reel to reel. It was quite archaic, but I think we learned a lot that way.
Man, wow, you got me intrigued here. I mean, you got a time machine so I can go back and see this?
It was really something. And of course that stuff is archaic now, but back then that's how you made a film. So we knew hands-on how to make a film, how to actually crank the background if it was panning behind the character, to crank at a certain increment and to slow in and slow out using increments on the camera. It was really, 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 battlefield conditions.
Oh my man, I'm really you got me interested now. Like as far as like because I'm always interested as far as the classic animation. I mean, I know now we're in the 3D era, but I grew up in the, like I said, I was born in '91, and 2D was Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, and so forth.
Oh yeah.
So I'm always a guy where when they came out on DVD and they showed the making of these movies, I was always intrigued. So, and my friends were bored, but I would be intrigued with it. So even if I watched it 4 and 5 times, it didn't matter to me. So I always was intrigued with it. I'm not a drawer, but I can sketch a little bit. So what year did you come to Disney?
I started Disney in 1981 after 2 years at Cal Arts. Cal Arts was a training ground for them. A lot of the big names now and in that era came from Cal Arts. Because you have to remember, now almost every school has an animation program in varying degrees of quality. But back then, there were basically only a few schools, maybe 2 or 3, that had really, good animation programs. Trout Institute in Brooklyn, New York, was one of them. And
right.
I did actually attend that for 2 years. But I was frustrated because I didn't feel like I was getting what I needed. And the teachers there told me, really, you know more about animation than a lot of us do. You should probably go to California where the industry is. So I talked to my parents and, they said, yeah, let's do it. So I basically packed up in 1978, and moved to California and started, Cal Arts in the fall of 1979. And then after 2 years there, they look at our films at the end of every year, and they pulled me and about 10 other people out at that time and brought us to the studio where we started a training program with Eric Larson.
Right. He was one of Disney's 9 old men.
Yes, he was. Yes, and a wonderful man, a brilliant teacher, and a really wonderful person. So then if we were picked out of that group, we would stay, and I stayed at the studio for 20 years.
Wow. Okay. So when you came to the studio, that was around the time they was making The Fox and the Hound, correct?
Just after. They were just starting on The Black Cauldron, but they were also doing Mickey's Christmas Carol. They were starting that as well.
Okay. So toward my next question, now around the time you came to Disney, that was around the time when it was ran by Ron Miller and Roy E. Disney was on the board with Ron Miller, and that was when Disney was at a different kind of pace. And then not long afterwards came Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Roy Disney came to the animation side with Jeffrey. What was that feeling like when Michael, Frank, Jeffrey, and all of them came aboard and tried to take Disney in a different direction with Roy?
Well, it was a very tumultuous time for animation and for the studio itself. When I started in August of 1981, it was like going back in time when you went to the studio. It was like the 1950s. Nothing had changed. The back lot was still there. The set for Zorro were still standing. There was the set for After My Professor, and all the old movies that I remember, the Western Street, they were all there, and you just walked the back lot during the breaks and whatnot. And it was very much run like studios were in the 1930s and 40s. But that needed to change, and as much as I loved the films that they made during that era, I don't think that the early 1980s, they were really in fashion, and they weren't making a lot of money. And unfortunately, a movie studio needs to make money, so change was definitely needed. Now, the change that came about due to the coming of Frank Wells and Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg really helped the studio to get a foothold into the modern day world. But in doing so, a lot of damage was done to the studio and to the people who had long careers at the studio. I recall we were still in the animation building on the main lot, the one that Walt built in 1940. That's featured in the feature Reluctant Dragon.
Right.
And that that was made for animation. And it was wonderful working there. I was just looking at some pictures today and thinking how great it was working there, how great it was working on those films at that time. But soon after those guys got to the studio, they had a big thing on the back lot, to meet everyone. And they shook hands and everything. This was on a Friday. That Monday, half the studio got pink slips. People who'd been there for 20 and 30 years got laid off. And they started outsourcing everything. So what used to be a family thing became a corporate thing. Almost immediately when it became the Walt Disney Company, it was different from Walt Disney Productions.
Right.
And I was partial to Walt Disney Productions. But I also can understand on the other side how important it was to make changes in order to keep relevant in that era and to make the kinds of films that we were eventually able to make. The other thing is that they weren't too sold on animation. It was very expensive, very labor intensive, and it would take a long time to get your money back. So Eisner and Wells in particular were really thinking, well, and Jeffrey at the beginning, were really saying, we got to get rid of this. It's too expensive. They were going to shut down animation. So basically every day during the mid-'80s, we would come in and wonder if we were going to be there the next day. And it was a very uncomfortable and frightening time while we were making Black Cauldron.
Right.
And so it went on. Finally they said they were going to they were going to send out in-betweens. I think on Mouse Detective. And they kept trying to cut corners and cut corners and cut corners. And it was really getting bad. It was really getting difficult. When they kicked us out of the animation building and put us in warehouses in Glendale, that was really a cutting blow, because that building had been made for animation. They basically kicked us out, remodeled the thing, and made it all executive buildings. And we were just kind of in these like shabby warehouses in Glendale. The good thing about that is that I believe that's where we made our best pictures, was in those little warehouses.
Absolutely, because that's one thing that everybody mentions in a lot of the making of the movies, like the making of Little Mermaid and Beauty. And, of course, the documentary Don Juan did, Waking, Sleeping Beauty, they mention that because, as you mentioned, and as I know as well from my research from watching making these movies, as you mentioned, because when Jeffrey and them came, y'all was making the Black Cauldron, and that was kind of the picture y'all made that didn't do very well. And then when Great Mouse Detective came with John Musker and Ron Clements, it was like, okay, this is a good step, because to me, I love Great Mouse Detective, and I thought it was a good movie. Then I got the Oliver and Company and Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Little Mermaid, and it was like Disney's coming back. It's made change a bit. And I know, too, that both Jeffrey and Michael came from live action. They didn't have animation experience.
Right. And that's why they were really, couldn't see the value in it. But, thank goodness Roy Disney, Walt's nephew, was still there, and he would come in and basically tell them, no, this is the cornerstone of our company. This is what we were built on. This is what we're known for. You can't get rid of this. And he somehow got Jeffrey's ear, and Jeffrey read Frank and Ollie's book, the Illusion of Life, and decided he did think animation was vital, but it needed to be brought into contemporary times. So I think what you're reacting to is sort of the changing of the guard. I mean, the younger people did work on Black Cauldron, but it was sort of conceived in an era where they were kind of backwards in their thinking. And when we started Mouse Detective, it was kind of backwards in its thinking too. But we stopped about a few months into it, and Jeffrey wanted it retooled. And he got someone new to do the music, and we changed some of the songs around and stuff like that. It became much more hip and upbeat and fun. And we started realizing, as young people, oh, this is our chance. So we worked really hard on that film, and it was a success. It actually did pretty well.
Right.
And it was much more cartoony, which is what I think people were dying for, with brighter colors and, more fun in the animated films. And then after that, with the success of that, we made Oliver and Company. Now, also at that time, Don Bluth's productions had been becoming quite successful with animated features as well. Like them or not, they really spearheaded a move back towards animation, animated features.
Right.
And for the first time, Disney really had some competition. And so that made us want to work harder to make the films better. And it was like Don Bluth's productions would make a film and it would make money, would make a good money, and then we'd make one and it would make a little more money, and then he'd make one and it would make a little more money, and finally we got to the point where we were making consistently good and successful films. But Oliver and Company was one of those films where it's like, okay, we gotta really bring this into the modern day. And so it was one of the few films that was actually set in modern day at that time.
Right.
I think Dalmatians may have been the other one. But he got people like Billy Joel and Bette Midler and people who were kind of current to come in and voice the thing, and it became a contemporary hit. It's not one of my favorite films. I think it's cute, and I think it's well made, but it doesn't hold my attention as an adult as much as it probably holds the attention of kids.
Right.
But you have to understand that all these things are stepping stones. It was like going up little steps at a time, and each film brought us to the next goal and the next goal. So while we were on Oliver and Company, they showed us reels from a new film they were putting together called The Little Mermaid. And I remember going to the screening room on Flower Street, and we saw two story reels. One of them was Part of Your World, and one of them was Under the Sea. And we just all of us animators, and we're pretty hard to impress. All of our jaws dropped. We were like, "This is unbelievable," and we couldn't wait to get on those films because that film looked so great.
Right.
So we hurriedly finished off Oliver and Company just so we could get on Mermaid and really start making that work. And that was Mermaid. I just knew instantly it was going to be a hit. I knew instantly, so it was really fun. It was hard work because we were challenged to do really high quality work very fast. And I think it's a great looking film, and I think it's absolutely charming, and I think it deserves its place in animation history.
Absolutely. Now, before I move to my next question, I wanted to ask you real quick, as we were talking about the movies from that time. Did you work on The Rescuers Down Under?
Yes, I did.
Because I was a fan of The Rescuers, and I loved The Rescuers Down Under. And what I didn't know was it came out, but some people said it didn't do well, and Tom Schumacher said that Jeffrey had pulled some of the ads. Do you know kind of why that didn't go so well with the sequel?
Well, Walt always said he didn't want to do sequels, and now sequels are the big thing. Everybody, but Hollywood has changed a lot. But at the time, we weren't too sure we wanted to do a sequel either, because we were all still kind of hanging on Walt's every declaration. But Jeffrey was running the studio, and what he said goes. And I know there were several scripts that were done for the sequel, and one of them that I really liked took place in San Francisco. I think it was written by Rob Minkoff and Tim Hauser, who are both great writers.
Right.
And good artists in their own right. And it took place in San Francisco, and it had that sort of like dragon woman villain, sort of like Medusa, but they were thinking about casting Eartha Kitt as that, and that would have been really interesting.
Right.
I think the climax took place during a parade, with the dragon and whatnot. It was you could almost visualize it while you were reading the script, and I really liked that one. But because of the success of the Aussie films at that time, the Australian films, they wanted something that would be more readily received, and that's how it became Rescuers Down Under. And the film, it's really not fair because it's a very good film and everybody worked really hard on it, but it has the stigma of being the film that's between The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
So it's like it's a pretty hard place to be in, and not be a musical. So
right.
It sort of gets short shrift, which isn't fair because it's actually a very good looking film, but it just doesn't quite have the same oomph as a musical did at that time.
Right.
And so I was on it a few months, and I was working on Bernard and Bianca, but I got pulled off to do a short for Epcot. About a handful of us got pulled off, and we did Training Command in another building.
Kirk and Gary worked on that movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Originally, Rob Minkoff was supposed to direct it, but about a month into it, less than a month, a couple of weeks into it, he was pulled off to work on something else, and they brought in Kirk and Gary, which was great for me because I got to work with them for the first time, really, as directors, and they were great to work with. I was a supervisor, so they could see my work, and it was the first time I was a supervisor, and then when it came time to cast Beauty, they thought of me, and that started my upward movement as a supervisor and being more active in the making of these films.
Right. So that brings us to our next question. What was it like working on Beauty and the Beast? Yeah, what was that like animating Mrs. Potts and Chip? Mrs. Potts kind of reminded me of an English teacup.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say, going on to that film was kind of a thrill because right after I got on it, right after I agreed to go on it, because they cast us a lot like actors, they told me that the voice was going to be Angela Lansbury, and I was really thrilled because I've always loved her work. So what I tried to do was, first of all, get used to the story and get used to how she fit into the story, and then think about what kind of a personality she'd have. As a supervisor, my job was to make sure that her performance and her appearance were consistent, no matter who animated her. And so, I had to go through and really think about, how do I make this believable? How do I make a talking, moving teapot? How does the teapot move? How much can I stretch and squash it without making it feel like it's made out of rubber?
Right.
All of these things had to be talked about. And me and Nick and Will, Nick Ranieri and Will Finn, would sit in a room and discuss how pliable these characters should be, and because they had to be believable because they were working with flesh and blood characters.
Right.
So we looked at a lot of cartoons that had inanimate objects moving and being personalities, and we realized that sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And what we were trying to get away from was morphing things, into like other shapes and things. They had to have a structural integrity.
Right.
So what I worked on a lot in that film was really keeping the nose or spout in this case and eyes anchored high on the pot, and it had to stay that way. No matter how much she stretched and squashed, her face couldn't be moving around on that, so it had to be really anchored, and that created the believability. And then we could be a lot more flexible with the characters. And then I thought, rather than having her, scoot around, I'd have her hop around, which made it more sprightly,
Right.
And that all had to be done before we actually started animation. And then Angela came in and recorded the song "Be Our Guest," and I wasn't there for that recording session, but I was there for the next recording session. And we showed her. I finished the animation on "Be Our Guest," and we showed her the animation, and then she just looked at me and she goes, "Oh, now I see what you're doing," because she didn't know we were going to do it in full animation. She
Right.
thought she was coming in to record this song. And so once she saw it, then we talked a lot about personality of the character, and she talked about her influences for stiff up a British type, and I talked about mine, and we came to some decisions, and it was good because her next recording sessions were even better. Not that her first one wasn't great, but her next recording sessions, she really nailed the type of character it is. Now, what's interesting about Mrs. Potts is that people are always saying, "Oh, she looks just like Angela Lansbury." Well, she looks nothing like Angela Lansbury. What people are reacting to is she acts like Angela Lansbury. I took the way she delivered lines and the tonal quality of her voice, and I had that match the drawings. So I looked at a lot of her live action work, but I really looked a lot at Jessica Fletcher in her Murder, She Wrote TV show.
Right, because that was on at the time that maybe.
It was very accessible. And I noticed that when she talks very quickly and very concisely, and she used a lot of fast head shakes, nods, and head tilts. And I thought, well, this is perfect. It's a teapot on a pedestal. I can use that to help marry voice to image. And so I did a lot of that, and I think that's what people are reacting to. It really does act like Angela Lansbury. It just doesn't look like her.
Yeah, one thing I gotta add though, I love the conversation that Kirk and Gary had brought up, and you had brought up too about how they're moving objects, because they brought up the scene where in the movie where Beast is walking back and forth, and Mrs. Potts and Lumiere is on the
yeah,
and they're going to jump down, and if they jump down, they're going to break, but they didn't,
Well, it's funny you should say that. I was just, there's a gag that I did around that time when I shot the pencil test.
Mm-hmm.
I had to jump off screen, and then I added a sound effect of breaking glass, and her going, "Oh my!"
Oh my!
I showed it to the directors, as if it were a real scene, and they just burst out laughing. It was so funny. I still have that scene. But actually, I did say to them, I said, "Look, she can't jump off that mantle and down to the floor without breaking." I said, "Let's throw a pillow there."
Right.
And that's how the pillow got there.
Yeah, because I remember watching that younger, and I remember when I first saw that, I was like, well, ain't she going to crack? I mean, it might be okay if she's a candle, but, this is a teapot. In real life, you drop that, I mean, unless he lands on the magical carpet or something,
We did think of that, too, and that's why I said, let's just put a cushion there, and everything will be okay.
Right.
And so that worked out great.
Now, did Mrs. Potts when I say that she looked the same, because I remember Don Hunt had mentioned that there was an early version that was cut, and y'all did it all over again. Mrs. Potts, was she the same way in both versions, or just when y'all?
I don't recall that. I recall going in, getting some drawings from the art director. In a direction on the go. There was a lot of development work done on her. There was one where she had like a tea cozy on that was like a shawl and whatnot. And there was a version that they were doing in England the whole film was completely scrapped.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that was completely scrapped. I don't think I ever saw anything but a few drawings from that. But they went with a much later Harvard version when they did the film that actually ended up on the screen. Not that there wasn't great work done on that first film. It just wasn't the tone that they were looking for in the film.
Right. Because pretty much in that version, like Kirk Wise mentioned, it's pretty much Beast is like constantly trying to propose to Belle, and they wanted to take it in another direction, which is what we have today.
Yes, yeah, it was the darkest film.
So, what was that feeling like when you first got the word that Beauty and the Beast was nominated for an Oscar and Golden Globe, and then they won the Golden Globe, and Alan Menken won for Best Score and Best Song, Henry Howard Ashman?
It was really shocking because nothing like that had ever been considered before. Animation was considered the bastard stepchild of Hollywood. It was not something that was highly regarded, and it wasn't until these films started making really, really more than live action films make, and were beloved more than live action films of that era. Than a lot of them, not all of them.
Right.
That it just caught us all by surprise, and so we couldn't all go to the Academy Awards. I wasn't a member of the Academy at that time. So we couldn't all go, and so what the studio did is they rented out the Hollywood Palladium Theater in Hollywood.
Okay.
Put on a big party with a huge screen, like a movie screen, TV projection, I guess. And the press was there and everything like that. It was almost like being at the Academy Awards, but we were all there to see the awards together. And yeah, we were all disappointed when we didn't win, but I have to say, Silence of the Lambs is a pretty great film too. And if we had to lose, at least we lost to a really great film. But Silence of the Lambs is memorable too. But I don't think, in the long run, it's a loss, because I think that people will remember and love Beauty for generations.
Right.
I don't. It doesn't matter if we get a shiny award or whatnot. I think the film speaks for itself, and I think it speaks to a lot of people. It's very heartwarming to talk to people today, 30 years later, 25, 30 years later, and to have them say how much it affected them and how much they loved that film. It's almost like having been one of the Scarecrow or the Lion or the Tin Man in the Wizard of Oz. It's like that kind of feeling.
Right.
So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. So when you went to do Pocahontas and you got Flit, before I touched that, what was the feeling like at that time? Because around the time I was doing Pocahontas, Jeffrey Katzenberg had left Disney and went to do DreamWorks, and then I believe Tom Schumacher kind of took over that part that he was doing, correct?
I think it was more Peter Schneider at that time. Tom was still second in command to Peter.
Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't until Peter went on the lot to focus on live action. Yeah. So it wasn't until Peter went on the lot to focus on live action film that Tom rose to power.
Okay.
Real power, I should say.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it a different feel for you guys when Jeffrey left?
It was interesting. It changed a lot in the animation industry. Jeffrey was on Pocahontas when I first got on it. I was supposed to go on to Lion King, and I chose to go on Pocahontas because it was a very different film at that time. Pocahontas was younger, and it had kind of a 50s kind of feel to it,
right.
Like a Mary Blair kind of feel. And I really wanted to go in that direction, but it ended up changing and becoming more sophisticated and epic, more like Sleeping Beauty. But I thought, well, I can have fun on this film. And so then, early on, the characters had voices. Mm-hmm. And then Jeffrey came in and said, no, the characters not going to have voices, and there's only going to be a few animal characters. And the focus was all on realism. And it was almost like because they didn't get the Academy Award for Beauty, they were going for the Academy Awards. On that one, I think Glenn even mentioned he'd really like to get a Academy Award for best performance for the character of Pocahontas. So it was really very epic in its scope. The art direction on it, and the direction is beautiful. I loved working with Mike Gabriel and Eric Goldberg. I really liked the character Flit. I got to sell the character basically. I got to go out. They sent me down to San Diego, and I sat in a big cage with a bunch of hummingbirds, and they'd come up and pull my hair, and I did sketchbook after sketchbook after. So I got to know how they moved realistically, and then I helped develop a personality that matched that. First he was going to be like a spy, and then he just became kind of like the conscience, and sort of a what do they call that? Offense for Nico's hijinks, He was like the voice of reason. So it was a lot of fun developing that character and figuring out how to make it move. And I learned a lot about timing because he moved so quickly. I had to figure out how to move him to make him look staccato and still have enough drawing so that it didn't look, like stills.
Right.
So it was a challenge, but I really did apply what I learned about timing from that film on all my other films, and my animation got even more lively and even more snappy than it was before I worked on that film. So I learned a lot from that. But Jeffrey left I remember going to a meeting with him where we showed a scene of Flit that I had done to sell the character. It wasn't a production scene; it was just a test that I did.
Right.
And he loved it, and he said, "Yes, this is great. Let's do this." So he did like that, but he left soon after that, and he went over and developed his own studio. Now, just real quick, I just want to say that because he created his own studio, he needed talent, and he started calling top talent at Disney and taking them out to dinner and wining and dining them. And at one point, he flew me up on his private jet to San Francisco to look at what they were doing on ants at PDI.
Right.
And you felt like you were really worth something because up until then, Disney was always very kind to us, for the most part. But the money wasn't really that great, and there's a lot of stuff that was not pleasant. I don't look back on it with negativity. I just put it in historic perspective. But after Jeffrey began trying to steal people away from Disney, we suddenly became valuable to the studio, and they started having to pay us salaries that were commensurate with what we were actually doing.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. So, that changed a lot because of Jeffrey doing that. And, you know, I could have gone over to Jeffrey's, and a lot of my friends did, but I didn't really want to. I didn't really feel that the product that he was going to make was of the same caliber at Disney. And I was kind of a Disney person. I was raised Disney, and I just felt I needed to be loyal to that family.
Right.
And so I stayed at Disney. And, you know, I'm glad I did. Because I just enjoyed being there.
Everyone loves the taste of Hellman's Real Mayonnaise.
Potatoes have eyes for Hellman's. Onions cry for Hellman's. Lobsters claw for celery stalks. And food loves Hellman's.
The rich, creamy taste of Hellman's. It makes foods you love best taste even better.
Hellman's has the taste you love. Good food gets better. Just put it all together with the one best mayonnaise. Yes, food loves Hellman's. So bring out the Hellman's and bring out the best.
Alright, YouTubers, this is Ranger Matt here with PE Slick Podcast in the house. Listen, I hope you guys had a blast listening to my boy Dave talking about his time there at Disney. This is the first half of the interview. Please stay tuned on Friday for the second half of my interview with my boy Dave. I hope you enjoyed it. There's more to come. Dave, special shout out to you, man. Thank you for coming on my podcast, man. Hope you come back again. Until Friday, next time, have a good night.